She replaced her sister as a nanny for one day, unaware the single dad was a millionaire who'd. The next morning, Emma woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just the lingering stress from yesterday's chaos. But no matter how hard she focused on mundane tasks, making coffee, folding laundry, scrolling through her phone, the image of Daniel kept creeping back into her mind. There was something about him that unsettled her, something deeper than his wealth or charm. It wasn't just the way he looked at her, like he could see straight through her disguise. It was the way he made her question everything about herself. Who was she really? A struggling 20-something barely keeping her life together? Or someone capable of stepping into a world so vastly different from her own? As the day went on, Emma found herself replaying every interaction, every word exchanged between them. She remembered the way Sophie had called her out, the sharpness in the little girl's voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You're not like Lily." Those 5 words haunted her now, echoing in her head as if they carried some hidden meaning. Was it possible Daniel already suspected the truth? If he did, why hadn't he confronted her? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it impossible to focus on anything else. By late afternoon, she caved and texted Lily, asking for more details about the family. Her sister responded vaguely, mentioning only that Daniel was private and preferred to keep things low-key. Private? That didn't even begin to cover it. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel sat in his home office, staring absently at the spreadsheets on his laptop screen. His thoughts weren't on work though. They were on Emma, or rather, the woman pretending to be Lily. He'd known almost immediately that something was off. The subtle differences in mannerisms, the faint hesitation in her responses, it all added up to someone who wasn't quite who she claimed to be. Yet instead of feeling angry or betrayed, Daniel felt intrigued. There was an authenticity about her that stood out, a vulnerability that drew him in despite himself. For years, he'd been surrounded by people, putting on performances, wearing masks tailored to fit whatever role they thought he wanted them to play. But Emma, she seemed real, and that intrigued him more than anything else. That evening, unable to resist the pull of unanswered questions, Daniel decided to dig a little deeper. He pulled up the contact information Lily had provided when she first applied for the job and cross-referenced it with public records. What he discovered shocked him. There was no trace of a nanny named Lily associated with the address listed. No social media profiles, no employment history, nothing. Whoever this woman was, she had gone to great lengths to cover her tracks. But why? The thought sent a chill down his spine. Was she after his money? Did she have some ulterior motive? Or was there another explanation entirely? Back at her apartment, Emma wrestled with her own dilemma. Part of her wanted to call Daniel and confess everything, to explain that she'd only stepped in to help her sick sister and never intended to deceive anyone. But another part of her hesitated, unsure of how he would react. Would he forgive her? Or would he ban her from ever seeing the kids again? The bond she'd formed with Sophie and Max, however fleeting, meant more to her than she cared to admit. They reminded her of herself at their age, curious, resilient, searching for connection in a world that often felt overwhelming. Losing them felt unthinkable. By Friday, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers, clarity, anything to ease the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. So she did the one thing she swore she wouldn't do. She returned to the mansion. This time, she didn't bother pretending to be Lily. Instead, she rang the doorbell, heart pounding, and waited. When Daniel opened the door, his expression shifted from surprise to something softer, almost relieved. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, stepping aside to let her in. His calm demeanor threw her off guard. Had he been expecting her? Inside, the two of them sat across from each other in the living room, the silence stretching taut between them. Finally, Emma broke it, her voice trembling as she confessed everything. She told him about Lily's last-minute plea, her desperation to make ends meet, the accidental discovery of his true identity. To her astonishment, Daniel listened without interrupting, his gaze steady and unreadable. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Why are you really here, Emma?" he asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. Why was she here? To apologize? To beg for forgiveness? Or was it something deeper, something she hadn't dared to acknowledge until now? Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sophie appeared, clutching a stuffed animal and looking suspiciously between the two adults. "Daddy, is Emma in trouble?" she asked, her voice small but firm. Daniel glanced at his daughter, then back at Emma, his expression softening. "No, sweetheart," he replied gently. "Emma's not in trouble." But the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Not yet. As Sophie retreated upstairs, leaving the two of them alone again, the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Whatever happened next would change everything, for both of them. Over the next hour, Daniel revealed pieces of his own story, sharing glimpses of a life shaped by privilege and loss. He spoke of his late wife, the mother of his children, and the void her absence had left behind. "I hired Lily because I thought having someone consistent in their lives would help," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "But lately, I've started to wonder if I've been looking for the wrong kind of consistency." His words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Before she could process it fully, he stood and walked toward the window, gazing out at the sprawling grounds. "I don't know what your intentions were when you came here," he continued, turning to face her. "But I do know this. You've brought something into this house that's been missing for a long time. Light, honesty, maybe even hope. Hope." The word reverberated in Emma's mind, sparking emotions she didn't know how to handle. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this moment could lead somewhere meaningful, but fear held her back, whispering warnings of heartbreak and betrayal. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, the shrill ring of Daniel's phone shattered the fragile peace. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening instantly. "We need to talk later," he said abruptly, excusing himself before she could protest. Alone in the cavernous living room, Emma felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on her once again. What had that phone call been about? Why had Daniel's demeanor changed so suddenly? And most importantly, where did they go from here? As she rose to leave, she noticed a framed photo on the mantel, a picture of Daniel and his wife, smiling brightly against a backdrop of golden sunlight. Something about it stirred a deep ache within her, a longing for connection and belonging she hadn't realized she'd been craving. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Their lives were intertwined now, bound by secrets and possibilities neither of them could ignore. Emma lingered by the fireplace, her fingers brushing against the frame of the photograph. The warmth in Daniel's eyes, as he looked at his late wife, tugged at something deep inside her. It was clear how much he had loved her, and yet, there was a quiet sadness, etched into every line of his face. A loneliness that no amount of wealth or success could fill. She felt it too, though hers came from a different place. Years of scraping by, chasing dreams that always seemed just out of reach. For a fleeting moment, She wondered if two people, so unalike, could ever truly understand each other. But then again, wasn't life full of surprises? The sound of Daniel returning pulled her back to reality. His expression was grim, his jaw tight, as he slipped his phone into his pocket. "That was my lawyer," he said, without preamble. "There's been a complication with an investment deal I've been working on for months." Emma frowned, unsure why he was sharing this with her. Before she could ask, he continued, his voice heavy with frustration. "Someone leaked confidential information about the company. A rival trying to sabotage us. They're demanding we settle privately, before things escalate further." The weight of his words settled over them, like a storm cloud, thick and oppressive. Emma hesitated, unsure whether to offer comfort or simply stay silent, but something about the vulnerability in his tone made her speak up. "Do you think they'll succeed?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head, though his gaze remained distant. "No, we've worked too hard to let someone else dictate our future. But it's going to take everything I have, time, energy, focus, to fix this mess." He paused, glancing at her as if seeing her for the first time. "And honestly, Emma, I don't know if I can do it alone." His admission caught her off guard. Was he asking for help, or was this his way of pushing her away, reminding her of the chasm between their worlds? She didn't know what to say. So instead, she nodded slowly, offering quiet support. In that moment, she realized how much Daniel carried on his shoulders. Not just the pressures of being a millionaire, but also the responsibilities of raising two children who needed him more than anything. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her too, even if neither of them fully understood it yet. Over the next few days, Emma found herself drawn back to the mansion almost involuntarily. At first, she told herself it was for Sophie and Max. They'd grown fond of her, and she hated the thought of leaving them behind. But as she spent more time there, helping Daniel navigate both parenting challenges and business crises, she began to see glimpses of a man far more complex than she'd imagined. Beneath the polished exterior was someone who cared deeply, who fought tirelessly for those he loved, even when it cost him dearly. And somewhere along the way, she stopped pretending she was only there for the kids. One evening, after putting Sophie and Max to bed, Emma joined Daniel on the patio, overlooking the garden. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Neither of them spoke for a while, content to sit in companionable silence as fireflies danced around them. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. "I never thanked you properly," he said, his voice low but sincere, "for stepping in when I needed someone most. You didn't have to, but you did anyway." Emma smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You don't owe me thanks. I messed up, remember? I lied to you from the start." To her surprise, Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe, but sometimes lies lead to truths we wouldn't have found otherwise." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes reflecting the soft glow of the string lights above them. "Like the fact that you're one of the most genuine people I've ever met. You've reminded me what it means to trust again, to let someone in, even when it feels risky." His words sent a shiver down her spine, igniting a spark of hope she hadn't dared to acknowledge until now. But before either of them could say more, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the spell. A black sedan pulled into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Out stepped a sharply dressed man clutching a briefcase, flanked by two others who looked equally imposing. Daniel tensed immediately, rising to his feet. "They're here," he muttered under his breath, his expression hardening. Emma stood beside him, her heart racing. "Who are they?" she whispered. "The rival investors," he replied grimly. They're here to negotiate or intimidate, depending on how you look at it. As the men approached, Daniel squared his shoulders. Determination etched into every line of his body. Emma instinctively reached for his hand, squeezing it briefly. Before letting go, whatever happened next, she would stand by him. Not because she owed him anything, but because she believed in him. Together, they walked toward the visitors, ready to face whatever came their way. Hours later, after tense negotiations and heated arguments, the meeting ended with an unexpected twist. The rival investors backed down, not because of Daniel's wealth or power, but because Emma had unknowingly revealed a critical detail during casual conversation earlier that week. Her innocent remark about Sophie's school project had inadvertently exposed a loophole in their demands, giving Daniel the upper hand. As the men left defeated, Daniel turned to Emma, awe written all over his face. "You saved us," he said simply, pulling her into a tight embrace. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Emma officially became part of the household, not as a nanny, but as a partner in every sense of the word. She helped Daniel rebuild not just his business, but also his relationship with Sophie and Max, showing him that love didn't have to come with conditions. For her part, Emma discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. She learned that courage wasn't about having all the answers. It was about taking risks, even when the outcome was uncertain. On a crisp autumn morning, as the golden sunlight spilled across the mansion's sprawling grounds, Daniel took Emma's hand and led her to the same spot where they'd shared countless conversations. This time, however, he knelt before her, holding out a simple silver ring. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you stay? For good?" Tears pricked at the corners of Emma's eyes as she nodded, laughter bubbling past the lump in her throat. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. Their story wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real, and in a world filled with uncertainty, that was enough. As they stood together, surrounded by the beauty of the season and the promise of a future built on trust, Emma realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest adventures begin with a single step into the unknown. As the days turned into weeks, Emma and Daniel's bond deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. The mansion, once a symbol of Daniel's isolated life, became a home filled with laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. Sophie and Max adored Emma, often referring to her as the fun one, who always knew how to make things better. Whether it was baking cookies late at night or reading them stories until they drifted off to sleep, for Daniel, having Emma by his side felt like finally finding the missing piece of a puzzle he hadn't realized was incomplete. But even amidst the joy, lingering questions remained. Would their love withstand the scrutiny of the outside world? Could someone from such humble beginnings truly fit into Daniel's extraordinary life? The turning point came unexpectedly. During a charity gala hosted at the mansion, a lavish event attended by some of the city's most influential people, Emma had been hesitant about attending, worried she wouldn't belong among the glittering crowd. But Daniel insisted, assuring her that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Dressed in an elegant gown, borrowed from one of Daniel's designer friends, Emma walked into the ballroom, feeling both nervous and exhilarated. The room buzzed with conversation, but all eyes eventually landed on her. Not because of what she wore, but because of the way Daniel looked at her. It was unmistakable. Pride, admiration, and something far deeper. Midway through the evening, disaster struck. A journalist cornered Daniel, probing him about rumors swirling around his recent business dealings. The tension in the room grew palpable as whispers spread like wildfire. Some guests began to speculate whether Emma's presence was part of a PR stunt to distract from the scandal. Hurt flickered across Emma's face, but before she could retreat, Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs like steel. "Emma isn't here for show," he declared firmly. "She's here because she's changed my life, for the better." His words silenced the crowd, leaving no room for doubt about his feelings. But the real test came later that night when they returned to the quiet sanctuary of the mansion, sitting together on the patio under a blanket of stars. Emma finally voiced the fears she'd kept buried. "What happens when they dig deeper?" she asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "When they find out I'm not like you?" Daniel took her hand, his touch grounding her. "You think I care about any of that?" he replied, his tone unwavering. "What matters is who you are, not where you come from. You've shown me that love doesn't need titles or bank accounts. It needs honesty, kindness, and trust. And you've given me all of those." His reassurance eased some of her anxiety, but the stakes were higher than ever. Over the next few days, the media frenzy intensified, fueled by anonymous tips and wild speculation. Photos of Emma appeared online alongside headlines questioning her intentions. Friends warned Daniel that associating with someone so different might tarnish his reputation. Yet through it all, he stood steadfast, refusing to let anyone dictate his choices. "They don't get to decide what makes me happy," he told Emma one evening, holding her close. "Only we do." The climax arrived during a live interview Daniel gave to address the growing controversy. Surrounded by reporters eager for drama, he spoke candidly about his journey, the loss of his wife, the struggles of raising 2 children alone, and the unexpected gift of finding Emma. "Love doesn't follow rules," he said, his eyes meeting, the camera lens as if speaking directly to Emma. "It finds you when you least expect it, often in the most unlikely places. And when it does, you hold on tight, no matter what anyone else says." His words resonated deeply, not just with Emma, but with viewers around the world. By the end of the broadcast, public opinion had shifted dramatically, with many praising Daniel for choosing authenticity over societal expectations. With the storm subsiding, Emma and Daniel focused on building a future together. They decided to use their platform to support causes close to their hearts, funding scholarships for underprivileged students, and advocating for single-parent families. Sophie and Max thrived under their blended dynamic, flourishing in school and embracing new adventures with open arms. As for Emma, she discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed, a resilience born from stepping into the unknown and trusting that love would guide her through. Years later, standing on the same patio where they'd shared countless moments, Emma watched as Daniel chased after Sophie and Max, now teenagers full of energy and wit. She smiled, marveling at how far they'd come since that fateful day she'd agreed to fill in for her sister. Life hadn't been without challenges, but every obstacle had only strengthened their bond. Together, they had proven that true connection transcended wealth, status, and circumstance. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, again and again, despite imperfections. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Emma slipped her hand into Daniel's. "We did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He squeezed her hand, pulling her closer. "We're just getting started," he replied with a grin, and in that moment, surrounded by the people they loved most, they knew they'd found something rare and beautiful, a love strong enough to weather any storm. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't measured in dollars, but in moments of courage, vulnerability, and unwavering devotion.